Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Interviewing Wednesday. It is December 7th, 2022. Please note this event is being recorded and is currently live on Facebook. The recording will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel for others to view in the future. By participating in this event, you give consent for your name and picture to appear. Please note that any comments you put in the Zoom chat window will not appear in the recording. For those people on Zoom, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please just enter them into the chat window. Also, for those on Zoom, if you'd like to connect with everybody else who's on the call, you're welcome to enter your contact information there. And I encourage everybody who's on the call to connect with everybody else who's out here. Expand your LinkedIn connections. For those watching on Facebook right now, if you have any questions, please just put them in the comment field. We are monitoring that feed and we'll be sure to get those questions answered for you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Morris. Back in 2008, I started a website called careerdfw.org, a website to help those who are unemployed in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. In 2012, I started a second website, careerusa.org, to help those around the United States. I have written a book called What I've Learned About Your Job Search that you may not know. It is available on Amazon, or if you see me in person, I always have copies with me. Since 2007, I've been facilitating and leading the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group. The group's been around since the late 1990s, and I'll tell you about our upcoming program at the end of this session. And since 2017, I've been a member of the practice interview team, and you'll hear more about that in just a moment. Well, we want to let Walt Glass tell us a little about the Interview Success Workshop first. So good afternoon, Walt.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Interviewing Wednesdays. I am an interview success coach, and I offer a free interview success workshop, and it's designed to have you gain skills and confidence for successful hiring interviews. Now, a successful hiring interview is one that either you find that you match or you don't match. And so how do we go about doing that? Well, you know, all of us agree that the interview is a selling situation and that we're selling ourselves. And back in 2000, when I flunked an interview so poorly, I decided I better get my act together. And I came up with a model called I Am, I Do, I Help. And the facts are that we are selling who we are, what we do, and how we can help them, the value that we provide. So how do we do that? Well, the workshop is an interview and a workshop at the same time. It's very informal. We're going to cover basic categories of questions and some sample questions out of those categories, and approaches, options, structures, strategies that we can use to answer that question, because it always depends on the question, the person asking, and where you are in the process as to what option you might choose. You have to be registered to attend, and that QR code you see on the screen is a way to easily give you a start on an email to send me to register. You can look up my About section for more details on LinkedIn, because it has the workshop information there as well. So I'd be glad to have you participate. And it is not a mock interview. It really is a learning interview. We're going to emphasize learning, not necessarily how we're going to be able to excel in a grandiose way that we just do an excellent interview. No, we're learning how to improve our skills. We're learning how to do a little bit better and sell I Am, I Do, and I Help. Be glad to have you participate. We call it Learning Without Squirming.
Walt, thank you very, very much. All right, it's time to hear from the practice interview team. Good afternoon, Ron. Ron, you're muted. There you go.
Maybe now you can hear me. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to see you here today. You can see the information for the practice interview team there on the screen, the email, the phone number to call. And so let's talk about the practice interview team for a moment. Number one, our job is to build confidence, so that when you help you build confidence in an interview, so that you don't get the jitters, you know what to answer, you know how to answer it, and you're ready for those things that maybe you're not. Couple of things, it's free. We say practice early, practice often. It doesn't mean you can stop at one. If you have multiple interviews, keep going. We do, however, request you give us at least 3 or 4 business days in advance. Sometimes we can squeeze it in earlier, but there's a lot of times we can't. So don't wait till the last minute. Our interviews are typically done by a panel of 2 to 3 people. Sometimes it's one-on-one, but everyone that's going to interview you has actually been a hiring manager in the past. So they offer their time free to help you understand and gain that confidence in a mock interview. This is a true mock interview, okay? There are 3 things that we're going to ask of you to send to us when you make a request for an interview. Number 1 is your resume. Number 2 is a job description. And number 3, a list of available dates and times that you're going to have free. So we also offer sometimes one-on-one coaching and as well one-way interviews. That's where you're just talking to the computer. We're seeing a lot more of those come up. Those are offered both by Walt and Jeff, and you'll see here in a moment, they'll tell you a little bit more about those. I will be pasting into the chat window a link where the video we're going to watch today, you'll be able to have one single PDF file that will list all the summaries of the 13 video files that Walt and Mark McDonald made for us, as well as the link to those files. So we're also always looking for volunteers for panelists to help interview people. So if that's something you've done and you like it and you have some time available to offer the group, we would appreciate that. I absolutely can highly recommend Walt Glass's interview. I myself did it back in around 2018, and there's a little piece of paper taped to my monitor that says, I am, I do, I help. I keep that there whether or not I'm being interviewed myself or I'm interviewing somebody else. That's fantastic information. So thank you all very much.
Ron, thank you very, very much. As Ron's mentioned, if you'd like to schedule a one-way interview, you're welcome to do so. Just reach out to Walt Glass or myself. The one-way interviews where we'll send you a link. You'll then follow the link. You'll do the interview. When it's over with, Walt or I will get the notification saying you've completed the interview, and then we will send you the link so you can go back and watch it. We don't watch it. We just want you to be able to practice what you're doing when there's a one-way interview. It's just you and the computer, you and the camera, nobody else is on the other end, and it's very, very different. So if you'd like to do one, just send your request to Walt or myself. Well, today we're going to do session number 12, discussing interviewers, difficult interviewers, difficult questions, and cultivating confidence. So our speakers are Mark and Walt. It's about an hour and 10 minutes long. So, I mean, we'll be going definitely past 2 o'clock here. If you have any questions, please just put them into the chat window. This is pre-recorded, so any questions you've got, we'll answer at the end of the session.
Okay, well, let's talk about difficult interviewers, and we're going to start with panel interviews. One of the reasons why the pit crew does panel interviews when you come for a practice is you get exposed to multiple personalities, right? So different people come at your background and the job description in different ways, and so you get a chance to deal with typically three interviewers when you come to the pit crew. In a real panel interview, it's difficult to build rapport, and rapport building is important, but it's kind of blocked by the multiple people involved. You want to ask neutral questions. Really, you want to not play any favorites. Now, you may know in advance or figure out during the meeting that one person's in operations and one person's in sales and one person's in accounting. And so if you've got a specific question that relates to those, it's okay to focus your question on one interviewer, but most of the time you're going to be, when you ask questions, which is very good practice, you are not directing them to anyone in particular. You know, it'll be interesting to see who answers when you ask a question, but you need to ask those questions in a neutral manner. You also need to use indirect questions, which is a bit more formal way to ask questions. And a good example of an indirect question is, I was wondering if you could share with me, and then ask your question. So it's sometimes called a question and a question. So I was curious, I'm curious to hear, I'm curious to know. question and a question. We have session 8 is all about asking questions. The whole session is all about asking questions. So if you're curious about how to ask questions effectively in a panel, then go dig into that a little deeper. Now, disagreeable or argumentative interviewers, the leading question interviewer might say something like, wouldn't you agree with me that you're overqualified? Okay, that's and in that case, just don't take the bait. Okay, we're going to talk about this in a few more slides, but you really need to focus in on the motivation for asking that question and not how it was asked. Okay, most people would answer that question with, oh, well, I got a slide on it, so we don't need to jump ahead. Now, disagreeable or argumentative interviewers, it's probably not that they're just having a bad day. It's probably that they are trying to put you under some stress, okay, and see how you react to stress. Okay, so they may disagree with things you say. They may argue with you to see, the strength of your beliefs and how well you can represent yourself when you're being pressured. The thing here is again, don't take the bait. Try to understand the motivation for their question, what's behind it, and not how it's delivered. Now, you may truly have a disagreement and start to get in an argument. And so the phrase to use if that starts to occur is, you may be right. You may be right. It doesn't say you agree with them, but it's a diplomatic way to disengage from the discussion and move forward without, hurting your chances of being hired by that particular person. So avoiding an argument, you may be right. I taught this to my kids when they were that age where they like to argue all the time. They didn't use it, but my oldest came back to me just a couple of years ago and he said, yeah, I've used that before. It's very effective. So now you got another class. You got the really friendly interviewer, and that's related to the chatty interviewer. The interviewer wants to talk a lot. The distracted interviewer who seems to be, reading his email or looking at his phone, and then the unprepared or uninformed interviewer. So this happens more than you would think, and there's a reason for it. You may have been scheduled to interview with 4 people, and the last, the day of your interview, somebody gets sick. Okay, so they're going to try to find a 4th person to fill that slot and do an assessment of your candidacy. And so the person they pick may have just received your information, a few minutes before the interview, and so they're not quite prepared. Now, the distracted interviewer, you handle these in a similar way. It could be an act to see how you deal with, the stressful situation of having a distracted interviewer, but it may just be truly that they're distracted. Again, they might have been interrupted from what they were doing to interview you, not expecting to interview you. So that's why they're distracted. And then you've got the really friendly and the chatty interviewer. Now, the really friendly interviewer can be a strategy. And I've heard this happen with Amazon. We had a candidate who came through the pit crew, was having an interview with Amazon, a second interview with Amazon, the same recruiter at Amazon, but a second interview. And he realized 5 or so minutes into the conversation that the interviewer had asked him some questions through a discussion mode, right? So it wasn't clear that she'd asked a question, but she had asked a question and she was expecting him to respond. He didn't respond, but he realized what had happened to him. And so he went back and he backtracked and provided the answer to those questions. So some interviewers, especially those in HR, really want to make you feel comfortable, okay? But they're expecting you to figure out or realize, that they've embedded questions into what appears to be just a small talk conversation, okay? So keep an eye out when you get a really friendly interviewer. They're not just being friendly. They have a purpose, and that's to interview you. So keep an eye out for what they're asking you, even though it may not appear like a question. Now, the chatty interviewer, this is probably not a very experienced interviewer. They want to talk and talk and talk. And the distracted interviewer, here's a strategy for both of those. So, and the unprepared. So these three together, chatty, distracted, and unprepared interviewer, you have to start telling your stories, right? So when you get a chance to break in, or if the interviewer is distracted or unprepared, you can say, hey, I was analyzing your job description and you were looking for someone who can do X, Y, and Z. Would you like to hear a story about a time where I did, and state one of your accomplishments? Or alternatively, if they're really distracted or chatty, you can just start telling the story, okay? And so that even though they may talk a lot and they're distracted and they're unprepared, they are still going to be asked to give an assessment of your candidacy. So you need to start telling them how you can help them. And you may, it takes a little diplomacy if they're really like to talk. But just ask them, a good way to introduce that is to go back to the job description and then offer a story. And then you can say, you can keep going, right? They may have 4 or 5 things. You're going to analyze the job description and figure out what the top priorities are. So you can just, and you have stories prepared for all of that. So you can just start offering them stories, asking permission to tell them a story, or offering the results and seeing if they're interested in hearing more about that, and get them on track. Give them some information to, make a positive assessment of your candidacy, even though they're not very good interviewers. Okay. The silent treatment. So sometimes, and this is another strategy, an interview strategy, and it typically happens after they ask you a difficult question. Why did you leave your last job? What are your greatest weakness? So you give the answer, and then they go stone cold silent, right? And this is a technique to see what else you'll say, and you don't want to say anything. So after an appropriate pause, you might say, is there anything else I can add to my answer? Or anything else you'd like to hear? Or did I answer your question? Simple as that. But do not fall for this trap. And it's another way to put stress on you. And the silence, the awkward silence may go on for some time. And that's the whole point, is to put you in an awkward situation, make you think that you answered the question wrong, or the answer that you gave is so poor that they're wondering if they should continue the interview. They just want to attack your confidence, frankly, and see how you respond to that. So maintain your confidence, and after an appropriate moment or two, ask them, is there anything else you can add, or did I answer your question? The very technical questions. So we have another slide on this a little bit later about funny questions like, or strange questions. How many jelly beans can you put in a 747, for instance? But sometimes in a technical interview, you'll get an impossibly difficult technical question. This is what I like to call it, the impossibly difficult question. And it's not about the answer. The question is about your process for dealing with a problem that you've never encountered before. And so that's the way you answer that question. So don't, again, back to confidence, don't lose your confidence that you're not going to be able to answer this question. The answer to this question is the process you use to deal with something that you've never dealt with before, something brand new. Where are you going to go to find out the information? What kind of questions you might have to clarify the solution space, those kinds of things. So if you have a difficult interviewer, so this assumes now you have a difficult interviewer who's not just acting, they may be having a bad day, but it will work for ones even if they're just trying to put you under some stress, and so that is to engage them in conversation. And so having a conversation with your interviewer is a very powerful way to build rapport, to gain information, and to improve your candidacy, because if people like to talk about themselves. And so you can ask questions that show you care, right? And their attitude may quickly turn from negative to positive. So you can ask them about the mission statement or the vision statement of the company and what resonates with them, the values of the company, the work community, what they do after hours. The only rule here really is that needs to be focused on your candidacy, right? And it also needs to be an open-ended question, okay? Something they can't just say yes or no or give a short answer. So you have to phrase the question positively, and you may phrase the question as you offer some information. You say, I think, you might say, I think the most interesting thing in your vision statement, the one that spoke to me the most, was X, Y, and Z. And so then tell them, and which tells them a little bit about you. And then you can say, what was it for you? Now, you may still only get a one-word answer, but the way you provided your information encourages them to speak a little bit more, and that'll start to engage them on a more personal level and take some of the difficulty out of the situation that they're involved in. So people love talking about themselves. It's an interesting fact that if you have a connection, if you ask some good questions, if you care, as Walt said up there, about how you could make the most contribution, what are the most important priorities, what kind of skills and abilities are most effective in this role. You're really trying to figure out how your background could help them out by asking these questions. That shows a certain business acumen and motivation to come to work there, and giving them a chance to talk about themselves will make them feel good about you, because people in general like talking about themselves. It shows that you care. And Jeff Curley, if you get Jeff Curley speaks at Jeff Morris's Friday group on a regular basis, and he talks about trust boxes. So certain things you want to bring up that help the interviewer understand that you're committed, you're motivated, you have knowledge, and that's valuable, and you're interesting to be around. So something a little bit about your personal life, that they wouldn't mind seeing you every day. So that's another thing that asking them questions or engaging them in conversation does. Now, again, I've had some panel or some candidates come through the pit crew that get confused about this, engage them in conversation, because it's more like a dialogue, right? You are prompting them to talk so you can learn things that are important to you to know, but also give them a chance to express their opinion. But it's kind of it's directed towards your candidacy. So it's just not talking about the weather or talking about your kids that play soccer. Now, if you have a lot of time, that's good. If it's an hour long or an hour and a half long interview, but otherwise it's going to be a pretty short. It may be pretty rushed, 30 or 45 minutes. So you want to target these. You want to be conscious of the amount of time you spend engaging in conversation. Okay, let's go on to difficult questions, and we have a poll here. So this is a select 3 out of the ones below, and there's quite a few of them there. Which 3 questions here are the most difficult for you to answer? And we'll give everybody a minute. Okay, so some of these I've already referred to a couple of the sessions. So the tell me about yourself question we cover in detail in section 6, which is interview openings and closings and follow-up. We're going to talk about what did you not like about your last job or company or boss? What was your greatest failure? We're going to talk about that in this session. We're going to also talk about the fatal flaw. I see that you do not have blank, a CPA certification, something that they asked for that you don't have. We'll cover that today. What would you say to your boss if he's crazy about an idea and you think it stinks? We're going to cover that today as well. The overqualified question today, the salary question in session 7. What are your greatest strengths and weaknesses this session as well? And why you're interested in this job and company, session 6. And reason for leaving, session 7. And of course, I coach on that session too. But the other half of session 7 is why did you leave your previous position or positions? Or why are you thinking about changing jobs? So, all right, very good. So that's the roadmap for today. Now I've got a document here. I'm not going to post it up yet because I think you might spend some time taking a look at it. I've got it on my computer here. I can bring it up, but this is a really good document. And if you sign up for a interview with the pit crew, I send this document to all the candidates, but we're going to post it up in the chat window. How to answer the 64 toughest interview questions. It's written in a very conversational style. It's easy to read. And the silent treatment is one of them that is in there. I highly encourage you to read this after we're done today. It'll give you some insight into how to answer all kinds of difficult questions. We're going to go over a few of them today just to give you an idea. Now, these next few are kind of questions or kind of questions that may put you in a bind because they appeal to some conflict you may have. Okay, so this first one on confidential matters. So this happens to salespeople, I think, pretty frequently, but it may happen to you as well. The interviewer asks you a question that requires you to reveal confidential information about your previous employer. And so this question pits your desire to be cooperative with the interviewer against your integrity. So always choose integrity, okay? And I've heard some stories where some people were really pushed on this, pushed very hard, you know, to the extent that the interview ended because they refused to reveal that information. But their opportunity did not end. You know, it was a test. They passed the test, and so they continued on in the interview process. But that's how hard this particular interviewer pushed. They pushed really hard. So don't give in. Again, back, you know, have confidence, choose integrity. You need to be diplomatic about it, but you know, you can just say, you know, that's information that my previous employer would consider confidential, and I'm not going to be able to share that with you. But you know, is there, you know, let's go into the next question or something like that. Okay, what would you say to your boss if he's crazy about an idea? This is one of the top 4 there, but you think it stinks. Okay, now this particular question pits loyalty to your boss and honesty against each other. Okay, and again, you want to choose the integrity answer, which wasn't your 2 choices, but you owe your boss honesty. Okay, that's the perspective. So you're going to tell them you disagree. You need to be diplomatic. But if your perspective doesn't prevail, then be supportive. Now, sometimes this question comes at you as, tell me about a time, right? Tell me about a specific time. And to the extent that you can answer that question without, you know, revealing confidential information, then you're going to tell that story about what you disagreed about and what you did, how you approached your boss, and let them know that you thought the idea was not going to work out, and then how that was resolved, you know, either favorably to your position or not. Either way is good, but you owe your boss honesty, and so you're just not going to sweep this under the rug, or, you know, do whatever he says, or, you know, in some other way try to undermine this poor choice he's about to make. Your boss, that is. Okay, I'm concerned that you don't have as much experience as we'd like in blank. Okay, so this is related to the fatal flaw question, which we'll talk about in a second. And this goes all the way back to the beginning of the interview, how you answer this question. And in the 64 question document, the very first question is, tell me about yourself, and we have a whole session on openings and closings. Let me refer to it here, which talks about how to make your opening statement, which is session number 6. And so I'm not going to talk about how to make an opening statement. I just want to say that after you're done with your opening statement, you need to start asking questions to ferret out what their most important requirements are. And this is not a question for just the hiring manager, a question for anyone you interview. What are your most important priorities? Or in your opinion, what are the most important priorities for this position? What are the skills of top performers in this role? These are questions designed to figure out what they really need. Okay, and once you have that information, another good question is to ask is, based on my background, where do you think I'll make the biggest impact? And so you can ask 2 or 3 of these questions. I would be pretty intent upon figuring out what they need, what this particular person believes they need in this role. And then you'll be much better prepared to answer these questions that may come up. And so when they say, that they're concerned that you don't have as much experience in one or particular area, then you can start talking about exactly what they told you at the beginning and how the combination of the skills make you a well-rounded future hire that could address their priorities. Okay, so now you're going to play to the combination of your skills. And if you have, this is where, years of experience and lots of accomplishments help sort any particular shortage you may have. Now, before I go into question 33, this is also related to this question about a weakness. So if you get a question, we have some more information about it, but I'm just thinking right now, I want to bring up that a weakness is a relative weakness, right? So when you talk about a weakness, they may tell you they, need this and that and the other thing. And so when they ask you about a weakness, a good way to answer that question, or at least approach that question, is to say, well, you need this, and I have 10 years experience of that, and you need that, and I have 12 years of experience in that, and then this third thing you mentioned, I've got 5 years of experience in that, so that's probably where I could focus on to improve my skills. Okay, so that's a context relative kind of answer to this question. You're not actually claiming it's a weakness. It's just the weakest of this group, which is related to their priorities. And hopefully it's not, I just have 6 months or 1 year. You have, relative to the other things that you're quite accomplished at, this one might be on the low end. So in that answer, you get to mention those 2 other things that you have significant contribution or skills in, and then compare and contrast that to the one that's at the low end. And if it's 12 and 15 and 8, and of course those years can overlap. I mean, those periods can overlap, right? It's not sequential. So that's a good way to address that question. Now, I like this question because of the answer. How do you feel about working nights and weekends? And in general, you don't want to answer a question with a question, but in this case, here's how it goes. I've done it before whenever the company needed me to. What's the norm for your best people here? And that's why I like this question, because you want to be one of their best people, right? So let's find out. It'd be interesting to know how much the best people work on nights and weekends, especially if they bring it up. Okay, how do you feel about working nights and weekends? Well, I feel like I'm going to be one of your top guys. And so what do your best people do? Okay, here's the fatal flaw question, right? You don't have something, a CPA degree, or something that's in there. Now, first of all, to your confidence about this is that you're in an interview, right? So at least to somebody in the interview process, that quote unquote fatal flaw is not a fatal flaw. But that doesn't mean you won't encounter somebody in the interview chain who absolutely believes that that you don't have something that's necessary. So again, this goes back to your questions right after the opening statement. And so you now get a chance to line up your qualifications to their most important priorities, which you've discovered by asking the questions at the beginning. Now, this is their perspective. It's their, you've asked them what is their perspective, what is their opinion, what is their, what are the most important things to them in this role. And so now you're going to feed that back to them. Okay. And there's a much longer description in the document that I'm going to give you. But it really starts with, first of all, you acknowledge the situation and explain how you overcome it by working hard, right? So you start off not being defensive at all, right? You just acknowledge, yes, I don't have that. And I've worked with people who did have it, and I've been very successful without it, okay? And then you go into matching your qualifications to their most important priority. So, but that's the general approach to that fatal flaw question. And you might even say, I've been very successful even without it, and even more successful than people who've had it. I worked with a lot of people who had whatever that thing is and have excelled and without it. Okay. Oh, well, I already answered this. Okay, yeah, so here's what I did. Here's the long answer. I went ahead and put it in a slide. And so I remember I added this now after the last round. So this is what you'll see in the document, okay? The interviewer may zero in on a fatal flaw, okay? And you don't want to be overly defensive. So this is kind of an objection. And the key is not to exacerbate the buyer's anxiety about your shortage, okay, but diminish it. So here's how you do that. Be completely honest, open, and straightforward about admitting the shortcoming, okay, showing you have nothing to hide. Do not apologize or try to explain it away. You know that the supposed flaw is nothing to be concerned about, and this is the attitude you want your interviewer to adopt as well. Back to confidence. Add to that, as desirable as such a qualification might be, its lack has made you work all the harder throughout your career and has not prevented you from compiling an outstanding track record of achievements. Okay, and you might even list a couple of them in particular. Or give some examples. Okay, through a relentless commitment to excellence that you have consistently outperformed those who do have this qualification. Now, the ultimate way to handle the fatal flaw question is to prevent them from rising in the first place. And so that's, back to knowing and understanding what their key requirements are and feeding that back to them. Okay. Okay, so now I'm Walt, and so here's his comments on tough questions. And there's always a motive behind those tough questions, right? So come on, here we go. Getting information about you. That may be one of their motives, right? They're trying to reduce risk that you're the right person for the job that they're, potentially making a poor hire. And so that's the tell me about yourself question in a nutshell. And that's where you talk about your accomplishments and your motivation to come to work to that company and to do that job. Okay, that's the briefest summary I can give you of what your opening statement is going to be. And go to session 6, interview openings and closings, to hear more information about that. They want to learn about your thought processes, right? So we mentioned this before. Can you think and support your answers with some logic or explanation? So tough questions give you a chance to exercise your diplomacy, your communication skills, how you deal with stress. And so that's what they're interested in seeing. You know, maybe in some roles, how you think on your feet. If it's a sales role, for instance, how you deal with objections. If it's a sales role, for instance. But if you're not, you know, then they may give you the impossibly difficult question, right? Which is just a way for you to talk about how you would solve a problem, because you're not going to be able to solve it, you know, sitting there in front of them. So that's what they're interested in finding out. And gauge your experience level, or your level of expertise and comfort with difficult tasks. Okay. So, for example, they might say, please tell me about a time when you were had to handle a difficult employee. Okay. Can you think and support your answer with some logic or explanation? So that's their motivation. Now, their motivation for asking you, you know, we're going to talk about that in a second. Oh, the overqualified question. So for every question that you get asked, you need to think in your mind, and this is a good thing to practice. You know, this is when you come to the practice interview, we'll ask you some tough questions. You're going to need to become kind of fluent in this process of why are they asking this question? What's the motive behind the question? Why is this person asking the question? So in their functional role, and why now? Like, where are you in the hiring process? And this is particular to the beginning or the end or the final rounds of the hiring process, but also the salary question, you know, which can come up early or later in the interview. And so one of the key rules is don't be negative or complain about anything, even in a subtle way. So one time at the pit crew, somebody made an offhand comment, and this is typically where it occurs, is people make offhand comments. And so he said, you know, the place I used to work was a crazy environment. Now, so my feedback to him afterwards was, what does that mean? I don't know what that means. Was that crazy good or crazy bad? Was your boss crazy? Did it drive you crazy? What did that mean? So even little subtle things like that can be interpreted negatively. Okay, so you don't want to be negative or complain about anything. Now, yeah, complain about anything. Now, you may be asked a question where the answer is a bit negative, okay? But you still need to have a positive attitude about it. So, for instance, you know, why'd you leave your last job? Well, you may have been laid off, and it may have been traumatic for you that you were laid off, but you want to get over that. You want to talk about how grateful you were for the opportunity to contribute to the company's success, and then show some empathy by saying, you know, they got into some financial difficulty and they had to lay me off. Do not say, unfortunately, they had to lay me off. That's one of my trigger words in this situation, because you know that you have an opportunity at hand for both you and the hiring manager. So it may have been a very fortunate thing, but that's another kind of subtle way that you display negativity. Okay. And of course, I think everybody knows that not to complain about things that happened in the past. But you know, if you don't get your head right, and I talk about this more when we focus on answering the question, if your head's not in the right place, your words will follow. Okay, they'll leak out. These negative thoughts and phrases will leak out, and so it's important to, you know, get squared away in your head about what happened to you and how it, you know, wasn't a personal thing, it was a business decision. Now, you need to be very brief as well. Okay, so star stories are supposed to be 90 seconds or less. sometimes you're asked to tell a star story, but sometimes you're just asked a direct question. How would you deal with a boss who, had a crazy idea? So you just answer that question and as brief as possible. Okay, you don't need to tell a story unless you're asked to tell a story. Now, oftentimes you'll have interviewers, I wouldn't say often, but sometimes you'll have interviewers who, after asking a difficult question, give you the silent treatment. So we already talked about that. Don't take the bait. You can, after an appropriate pause, you can say, did I answer your question? Don't start to extemporate, or, because most of the time when you start trying to figure out what you did wrong to answer the question, because the interviewers cast some doubt by giving you the silent treatment, you're going to say something you don't want to say. And it's not essential to answer the question. Okay, the tell me about yourself question, session 6. Prepare for this in advance. It's going to be customized for every interview. You're going to include a bit about who you are, what you do, and in particular, how you help. And those are based on your accomplishments. And then ask a question at the end of your opening statement. Okay, how do you approach negative questions in general? And this is, what did you not like about your last job, boss, company, or what was your greatest failure? So this is the strategy for negative questions. So if they ask for multiple instances, you're only going to give them one, okay? And then let them ask for more if they want more, okay? So convert any plural negative questions into a single instance. Ignore recent or avoid recency. You want to talk about something that happened long ago and far away, and you may have gained some insight that you've used successfully ever since then, right? A negative question is a chance to talk about what you learned as a result of whatever happened negatively. And so the most impactful things you've learned happened long ago and have helped you ever since. Okay, so that's a good way to approach this question. Go back in time, figure out some lesson that you learned, something didn't go right, you learned something very valuable and you've used it ever since. It's better if it's something that didn't have a significant business impact. So they've asked you this question, what was your greatest failure? You're not obliged to answer a question where you torpedoed the company. Okay, something that was a personal learning experience for you is fine, and the impact on the company is not that great. And those kinds of stories are just going to scare people, right? And now you may have that in your background, but you're not going to use that to answer this question, right? State the negative portion of the answer in as brief as possible and as few words as possible, okay? And I think here it says, just tell the truth, not the awful truth. You don't have to tell the whole truth, okay? But tell the truth, not all the awful details. And turn it into a positive. This is what I mentioned. So what I learned was, or so what I do now is, based on that experience of something that failed or didn't go the way you liked. Or, you had, what did you not like about your last job, company, or boss? I think a good thing to say about what did you not like about your last boss, and this is generally true, but, don't say it if it's not true, is that, I just didn't get a chance to spend as much time as I would have liked to. He was very busy, and, he traveled in and out, and so I enjoy and encourage and benefit from frequent interactions with my boss. That's true. And so that's a good thing to say. Yep, don't tell a story unless specifically asked. So these don't always require a star story. But that you may be asked one. You may say, tell me about a time where you and your boss disagreed. And so now you need to give a specific instance. Now, here's the overqualified question. Don't you think you are overqualified? Wouldn't you agree with me that you are overqualified? I have to say, I think you might be overqualified for this position. So the typical response is to disagree. No, I don't think I'm overqualified. Absolutely, Abby. I thought she was, I'm absolutely qualified. And then, after you say you don't think you're overqualified, you begin to explain all your skills and experience that you bring to this position, which just reinforces the fact that you're overqualified. Okay. So there you go. What did you just do with that response? You encourage them, you answer your question. Yeah, I've got a lot of experience and I might be overqualified. Disagreed and confirmed. So first is target right. So this is informational interviews. This is asking around. This is having target companies. This is finding out if the company that you'd like to go to work for values your experience. And so when you have an informational interview, you may ask, this question, kind of what's the, average experience level of people in your company? I have 20 years of experience. Can you think of someone else in the company that that's not in management or executive management who has similar experience levels? Just, you got to kind of screen out these companies that are only interested in less experience than you have, right? And you got to do that by talking to people inside the company. Now, so when they say, this is kind of a sales approach to it. So they voice this comment that they believe you're overqualified, then, what you need to be thinking and what you might say is then you would agree, I am qualified. I am qualified for this position, right? And then you got to go to your motivation. Okay, you really need to talk about your motivation because this is the crux of the issue. It's not bad to hire someone overqualified, but it is bad to hire someone who's not going to be very interested in the job and may be a short timer. So you need to talk about why you're interested in that job and why you're interested in that company. And if you do that, now you'll notice, if you remember a few slides ago, I talked about the opening statement. You should cover this in your opening statement. One of the very first things you summarize is, of course, your experience and your ability to contribute, how you can help, and your motivation to come to work for that company and do that job. So if you've done that, you've already set the stage for answering this question with more insight, or just repeat what you said before, that this is the job you want and this is the place you want to work. Now, I've encouraged people who struggled with this to produce some evidence. Okay, produce some evidence, and particularly about the job and the company. And so one way to produce evidence about the job is to kind of do a catalog of your achievements. So let's say you have 20 years of experience. I've asked people to say, for every year that you've worked, okay, write down your greatest achievement. Okay, write down your greatest achievement. And so you're going to have I'm going to have a list of 20 achievements. Now, look at that list and say, when were you the happiest? When did you feel like you'd made the biggest contribution? What kind of things were you doing when you felt you were most productive? And there's your evidence right there. You can say, yeah, this, you're not going to use these exact words, okay? But yes, I have 20 years of experience. That's what's going on in your internal head, right? And I've done a lot of good things, okay? I was the happiest. I enjoyed my work the most. I made the biggest contribution when I was doing X, Y, and Z. and that's exactly what you need me to do. So that's why I'm motivated to do this job. And then you can, do a similar thing maybe about the company's culture. And it's just, you think back at all your previous work experiences, what culture, did you feel you contributed the most to and really resonated with you as a kind of a personal thing. And then if the company has that as well, then you've got a very personalized approach to answering this question of why you're motivated to do this job and why you're motivated to come to work for this company. And that personal hook is much more powerful than just saying it. Okay. You're backing it up with some reason, some example. And then it's important also to close this piece of the conversation by saying, if you're concerned about me being a short timer, just rest assured, I'm a person of character. I would never accept a position to which I'm not fully committed. Okay, that's an important part of the story as well. Okay, let's talk a little bit about strengths. I like Clifton's strengths, and let's talk just a second about the definition of a strength. Okay, a strength is something that you do near perfectly, often without thinking about it. Okay, you can do it near perfectly, often without thinking about it. So one of the things I learned about myself was I can plan, I can make schedules, I can build a plan on the fly. Some people really struggle with that, and so I don't have to think much about it. I just do it. So that's a strength of mine. And Clifton Strengths helps you identify your work-oriented strengths and then gives you a voice to talk about them. So if you haven't done the Clifton Strengths assessment, then go ahead and take it. I think Jeff can post up some information about it. You get a little book, and the book comes with an access code, and then you go online and you answer some questions, and it tells you what your Clifton strengths are. And for a little bit extra money, it'll tell you your top 5. I think there's 30 something of them. If you want to spend a little extra money, I would recommend that you pay and get all of them, because number 6, 7, and 8 can also be considered one of your strengths, and you might want to know what those are a little bit deeper than your top 5. So that's what a strength is. Now a talent, you may have a talent and you may be able to do something very easily, but often talents may not be able to be productively applied. Okay, so your talent might be playing the piano, but that's not useful in a business situation, right? Unless you're a musician. But talent is a naturally occurring pattern of thought, feeling, or behavior that can be productively applied. Okay. So I like this question, and especially the questions about strengths. And so you can talk about what you've learned from Clifton Strengths or what previous bosses have told you. It's good to give some examples, very brief examples of the application of some of your strengths. Weaknesses, as I mentioned, you need to put those in the context of the job and their needs. Okay, so if they ask about weaknesses, you kind of want to summarize the things that you have a lot of experience in or made a lot of accomplishments in, and then compare and contrast that to the one where that you still have quite a few, but you have less, and say that's the one you're working on. Or where you might need to develop additional experience. And sometimes when they ask this question, it's a buying decision, and they're curious about what they might need to support you. Okay, so you want to go ahead and identify the areas where you might need some additional assistance to come up to speed, not as a weakness, but just as a area of improvement. And one time in the pit crew, someone was asked this question, and their response was, which I thought was really good. Their response was, my area of continuous improvement is, and then they mentioned this area that they were working on to improve themselves as one of their weaknesses for the moment. And so I thought that was a great statement, especially if you guys are process oriented, and understand the continuous improvement theory, then that's a good way to think about how you answer that question. Weaknesses are tough. Put it in the context of what they need in their role. Now, sometimes you may also, I've heard, if you give 3 strengths, you need to give 3 weaknesses. Some hiring managers may insist upon some balance there. The 3 things you're strong at, the 3 things you're working on to improve. So think about that as well. Okay. What are your salary requirements? We covered that quite extensively in session 7. Do your homework. BLS.gov is my favorite one, but there's also salary.com. And you can look up, I like the BLS.gov, that stands for Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS.gov, because they break down jobs by title, by economic area. They'll even tell you how many people in that are in that area that have that title. And then they also give you sort of a distribution. So they'll tell you the 10% rate, the 25%, the 50%, and the 90%. So they'll give you parts of the distribution of the salaries for that title and that location. And so all of those are very helpful pieces of information to have. And there's 2 ways to approach answering this question. Just go ahead and answer it, which is the approach I favor, especially if you're unemployed. No need to be too coy about it. Say that you've done your research, and for the responsibilities of this position, I would expect, and give your number. Now there's a little formula that I use. It's a little that helps you figure out what the range should be. So take a look at session 7 to figure that out. The important thing is once you provide your information, you're going to try to find out, or you're just going to ask, what is their range to see if you fit in. Your initial range should be pretty wide, about 25% wide, plus a little bit. Okay, so maybe plus 10, minus 15, minus 10 plus 15 from the number that you find on BLS.gov, and then even expand that a little bit. You're trying to not get eliminated by this question. So how you answer also depends on where in the process you've been asked, whether it was right at the beginning or farther in, where it might be an indication that they're interested in making you an offer and they'd like to know how expensive you are. Where if it comes at the beginning, they're just trying to see if you fit in their budget. And so you want to find out what their budget is. The other approach is to just delay with a good reason. You can even say that I think I'd be in a better position to answer that question after we've had a little more discussion, but I am curious to know what your range is. Okay, and that can work as well. Some recruiters will demand that you give them an answer, so you need to be prepared to give them an answer, but delaying can work as well. And then you can it's going to come around and you're going to have to give an answer eventually. Off the wall questions. How would you unload a plane full of jelly beans? How many pennies to stack as high as the Empire State Building? What kind of tree would you be if you were a tree? Okay, here's how you answer those questions. Pause and think. So, you need to take the question seriously. Which might be kind of hard to do depending on what kind of crazy question it is. Ask a clarifying question. What kind of plane? Are the pennies on the edge or flat? As if that's going to make a difference to your answer. And perhaps even use some humor. So here's a couple of examples from Walt. I wouldn't form a committee or hire a consultant. That's pretty funny. And I'm an evergreen tree because I don't like leaving a company. Okay, or I will ask Siri. So that's a little. But these are questions about how you might think about solving a problem, how you might approach solving a problem. Even though you're not going to be able to solve it right then and there. Okay, so as I mentioned several times, being able to handle difficult interviewers and answering difficult questions depends on a measure of confidence that you have the answer and you can deliver the answer. So let's talk about that a little bit. How do you do that, right? So you want to foster a positive attitude with a grateful perspective. So when you're talking about things that happened in your past, which may be painful for you, like getting laid off or being out of work for a long period of time, you want to approach those with a positive attitude and a grateful perspective. So that's key. And you can even say, you know, I was grateful for the time I had at XYZ Corp. I learned a lot. I contributed a lot. And, I got laid off because the company had to cut it back. And that also, you can demonstrate empathy. Empathy is a good way to demonstrate that you don't have any hard feelings, that you're not emotionally damaged by what's happened to you in the past. And so that phrase I used, the company needed to lay me off or had to lay me off or needed to reduce expenses, is demonstrating that you have empathy for their situation. It also, I'll show in a second, it also kind of demonstrates some business acumen, that you aren't taking personal what happened to you. You realize it's in the larger context of the business and the competitive environment and the economy. And so you got caught up into that, and that's how it played out for you. You also want to know yourself and the environment you thrive in. So if you get challenged about something, you know what you like, you know why you like it, you know based on maybe your achievement summary or your review of the company's cultures that you worked for, that you will be very successful and can contribute well under these situations. And so, knowing that will give you the confidence to answer these questions and or the confidence to walk away if it's not going to be a good match. Be proud of your achievements and your expertise. Okay, so claim that. And a lot of people talk about what they do, and that's a mistake, really. I mean, what you do is just the context for what you achieved. And so you want to talk about your achievements and the expertise, things you claim expertise in. Now, note that some expertise fades, right? So what you were an expert in 10 years ago may not be very valuable now, but the achievements that you achieved in that environment with those tools you used or that knowledge you had 10 years ago never expire. I mean, this is kind of fundamental to you. You take what you have at the moment and use your skills and abilities and your knowledge to achieve great things. And so those never expire. Achievements never expire. Those achievements you did, 15, 20 years ago speak to your ability to do similar types of achievements in the future. Honor your soft skills. So don't forget that some strengths and some talents might be in dealing with people, having good communication skills, having a great attention to detail, or being very dependable. So these are more soft skills as opposed to hard skills. So honor those skills as well, and make a good accounting for yourself of where you think you excel in this area of soft skills. Now, I highly encourage you to hear Jay Arbetter speak. And he talks about this because he had kind of a checkered beginning to his career, and but got squared away. And so no one knows your past. This is one of the key principles he talks about. Okay, think and talk about moving forward. Be positive all the time. So no one knows, that you just got turned down for a job after making it to the 6th round. Okay, no one knows that. Okay, so you can just set that aside and go forward with a positive attitude, all the great things you've done in the past. And life is full of second chances. Now, in school, you get one chance to take a test, you get the grade, but that's not life. Life is full of second chances. So if you've had some setbacks in the past, those don't apply. They don't matter. It doesn't define you. Okay. you're going to get second chances. Embrace those opportunities. So that's another good confidence building perspective. So I thought this was interesting, and I wanted to go over the 10 most desirable traits that all employers love to see in their employees. And I think I got this off Google. You could probably find it too if you just searched for desirable traits that employers are looking for. But you may not have all of these, but you're going to have some of them. So focus in on the ones that are strengths for you. A proven track record as an achiever. Okay, especially if your achievements match with what they need. Okay, so that's why it's very important to not to supplement what's in the job description with a one-on-one discussion with the interviewer, what's important to them. So a proven track record is valued. Intelligence, business savvy, or business acumen. So I mentioned this when I was talking about you getting laid off. So employees are looking, number 2 on the list, is people who have a business perspective. Okay, understand a little bit of how business operates, and you can demonstrate that by your exit statement. Honesty and integrity. Okay, a decent human being. So you may be challenged with some of these difficult questions to reveal confidential information or to talk about how you disagreed with your boss. And so now these are questions about your honesty and your integrity. So that's what companies are looking for. A good fit with the corporate culture. Okay, someone they feel comfortable with. And so this is, when you asking questions about the values and mission of the company and giving them an opportunity to state their perspective, is you're building a connection, and you're going to find out if your values match with their values, if your way of approaching business resonates with their mission. So they're trying to, if they ask you questions about this, they're trying to figure out how you would fit into their culture. But indeed, you are also trying to figure that out. So you don't have to wait for them to ask. You can ask those questions yourself, and they will go quite a ways to help build rapport too, because as I mentioned, people like to talk about themselves. So some people are likability, positive attitude, sense of humor. Some people are very stiff in interviews, and you don't need to be that way. You can, demonstrate your personality a little bit. We had a panelist of the pit crew, Kathy Gooden Mitchell, and she would always ask during practice interviews, if you were a candy bar, what kind of candy bar? What's your favorite candy bar? And just to get people talking about themselves. And it was a bit of levity, but it was interesting to see how people would answer that question. So it's okay to throw in little personal tidbits here and there. And as a matter of fact, in your opening statement, I recommend that you say just one little personal tidbit. You like to play tennis, or you've lived in Dallas all your life. Something that just gives some insight into your personality. And you can show that personality in your answer to questions too, because number 5 on the list is how likable a person you are, what's your sense of humor like, and do you have a positive attitude. Good communication skills, valuable in every organization. Dedication, or I call this commitment. Okay, are you willing to walk the extra mile to achieve excellence? And so if you are, you need to have some stories about this, but they're going to try to discern this through the interview process. What's your level of dedication? So this question about working nights and weekends is about dedication and commitment. It's unfortunate, but it's true that some companies run their organizations too lean, and that may be a job that you want to avoid. But on the other hand, they may do project-oriented work, and putting in extra time in short spurts is required and necessary. They want to understand if you're willing to do that. Your purpose, that you understand your purpose and you have clear goals. And then 9 and 10, enthusiasm, okay, high level of motivation, and you're confident, healthy, you're a leader. So those are the top 10 most desirable traits, and I'm sure you have some of those. Pick those out and focus on them in your interview to demonstrate your confidence. that is the end of the presentation. So come and practice. And if you're not quite ready to practice, if you'd like more of a coaching session, which is what Walt does, then reach out to him via his Yahoo email or his LinkedIn. And I think there's a lot of information on the LinkedIn about the interview success workshop that he gives. And that would be the way to get in touch with him. But I encourage you to practice. You'll just get better and better at your interviewing if you do.
All right, that's our presentation from Mark. I guess Walt was sick that week, and that's why he was not able to do it, but he's with us online. If anybody has any questions, you're welcome to unmute your mic and ask any questions you got. Questions from anybody? I didn't see any in the chat window or anything. Well, Walt, you weren't able, since you weren't with us that week when we recorded that session, any tidbit, any one thing you'd want to make sure everybody takes away with?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, when Mark and I developed the content for this, I mean, Mark kind of gave his perspective and I gave my perspective. So you'll see a lot of overlap in cases of some of the things we do. But the idea was for you to hear two different people's thoughts instead of just us getting together and give you one piece of content. Do you remember when this was presented, Jeff? Do you have a date?
This, I think, was somewhere maybe October of 2021.
Okay. All right. The tidbit I have for confidence is practicing, because every time you practice, you do get better. There's a lot of information that's here, and I can tell you that going back and reviewing the videos and picking out the pieces that you think are going to help you the most would be a good thing to do. Take your time in doing that. There's so many different ways to answer questions. And so the 64 toughest questions is an approach of saying, we're going to look at a number of questions and we're going to look at how we're going to answer them. The other approach is, what's the question? Who's asking it? Why are they asking it? Let me pause and think about it and see how I might respond to it. There is content that we can prepare in advance. We can generically prepare things that would apply to the type of job that we're looking for, and that preparation is going to be key. One of the things that I have an interview video that just goes with the workshop. It goes over the information. It's not really an interview. It's just a video and a handout, and it goes over everything in the handout. But one of those things in there is to take that job description and pull it out line item by line item. 3 soft skills is 3 lines. And then how can you talk about each one of those? It'll also identify any gaps that you might have. And so they're looking for 100 years experience and you've only got 99. How are you going to address that? One thing that was not mentioned in the session today is that when you see a gap, depending on the type of gap it is, maybe it's a particular piece of software or a particular experience with some area. Start looking and do some research on that area. See what you can find out. So while you may not have experience in it, you can talk intelligently about it and what it is, and that you're aware of it, and you have knowledge of it, you know what it does, you know a little bit about its purpose and functions. And so that way you can say, well, I haven't actually had that experience using that, but I do know that it's this and this, and it does this. And I'm excited to get involved and to learn that. And if it's a similar system, it's, CRM systems or CRM systems. And if they use a different one, then you can say, well, I'm very used to using that. The new one, all I have to do really is just learn the navigation and I can come up and speed on that quickly. Those kinds of things to help you. A lot of people will just skip over the gap. They just won't address it. They won't even look at it. They won't prepare for it. They won't do anything. So you can do that as well.
Okay, Ron, if anybody have any questions? If not, I'll get Ron and give him the final word here, and then we'll move on. Any questions, anybody?
Anybody?
Ron, any comments for what you saw today?
Yeah, I think the final word that I want to leave everybody is Interviewing is a skill that takes practice. Most people just underestimate how much time it actually takes to learn these new skills. So read up, look at videos, come have practice interviews, go to Waltz, take the time to make yourself better. It's a skill you can definitely learn with practice.
All right. Well, I did put in the chat window, the 64 toughest interview questions. That's in there. So you should be able to download that from there if you like. You can also go search for it on the internet. You'll find it out there on the internet. Career DFW, Career USA, we're putting on training 4 days a week. Please join us. Tomorrow, being the second Thursday of the month, we're going to talk all about networking, knockout approaches to networking with Michael Goldberg. Michael's from the New York area, I believe, and he's an ex-boxer. He used to box in his younger days, and so his whole talk is how to just knock out, approaches, helping people get out and meeting other people. This Friday at the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group meeting, we're going to talk about the one-page bio. Minna Brown will be with us to talk about that. If you're in the DFW area, please come join us in person. If not, we will be on Zoom or Facebook Live. This session has been recorded. It will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel. On the Career USA YouTube channel, click on playlist when you get there, because if not, there's over 400 videos there. But if you click on playlist, you'll see one of 7 different playlists, and you can down where that green arrow is, it says view full playlist. If you click there, you'll see a list of all the videos. These are the 13 videos that we have up there, along with some other special guest speakers that have talked to us before. The first 5 sessions are all about what do you do before the interview, preparing for the interview and getting ready. The next 5 sessions are everything you do during the interview, things you need to handle. And then the last 3 are some advanced topics. Today we did session number 12. Next week we'll do session 13, avoiding interview crashes. And that is common mistakes that Walt and Mark have seen candidates make over. Even though you know what to do, you tend to make the same mistakes over and over again. So they're going to talk about that next Wednesday. And then here's a list. Here's what it looks like on the YouTube channel. Just scroll down to find if you're looking for sessions. Otherwise, if you don't do that, there's some other things that are up above it, some other special guest speakers and things. But scroll down, they're all listed there on that playlist. If you're not receiving emails about our workshops and you'd like to join the Career USA mailing list, just send an email to CareerUSA, the + subscribe at groups.io. You'll never be spammed, but what you will get is the title of the day, the topic of the day, and most importantly, the Zoom link of the day. That way you can join us right away by just clicking on your Zoom link. Please remember, Career DFW, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. All of our speakers are volunteers. I'm a volunteer. Everything I've done for you over the last 14 years has just been to help you land your next great opportunity. So thank you very much for joining us today. Ron, Walt, thank you for being with us, and we'll hopefully see you later in the week.
Thank you.
Jeff and Ron, if you would hang on.